All right. Hey guys. All right. Back to study group time. Hey Candy. Hello. All right. So we're back to our study group time and we're doing our Eckhart Tolle New Earth. That's what we're reading. So for those of you who've never done a reading group, who's done a study group or done any of the study group material, basically every Wednesday and Friday we get together and we review a book or we discuss a book. So I'll read from the book and then I'll actually stop and then go back over it and give my commentary and my opinion about how. All right, I'm back, folks. So let me pen comment. There you go. No personal reading study group. All right, and over here, I'm not sure what's going on over here. Let's get back to that. There we go. Okay, I wasn't sure what that was about, so had to like refresh the other video here. So okay, cool. We're good. We're on. Yes. Perfect. All right, guys. Study group time. So we're doing Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. So I'm going to read from it, and then we're going to stop, and then we'll have commentary. If you guys have questions regarding the material or any spiritual-based questions or topical questions like that, feel free to ask those in the comment section below. Any personal questions is done. That was in the last hour, so this is all study group time. Okay. All right, guys. Let's get started. Cassidy's like Facebook glitching. Yeah, I was noticing that as well. I was like trying to figure out what was going on there. So there was some weird like glitchy stuff happening on I don't know if it was on my end or it was on Facebook's end, but it looks like we're okay and everything's going normal now. So all right, let's get started. So the first one, page 66. So that's what we're on. Being right, making wrong. Complaining as well as fault finding and reactivity strengthen the ego's sense of boundary and separateness on which its survival depends. But they also strengthen the ego in the other way by giving it a feeling of superiority on which it thrives. It may not be immediately apparent how complaining, say, about a traffic jam, about politicians, about the greedy wealthy, or the lazy unemployed, or your colleagues or ex-spouse, men or women, can give you a sense of superiority. Here is why. When you complain, by implication, you are right and the person or situation you are complaining about or react to is wrong. There is nothing that strengthens the ego more than being right. Being right is identification with a mental position, a perspective, an opinion, a judgment, a story. For you to be right, of course, you need someone else to be wrong. And so the ego loves to make wrong in order to be right. In other words, you need to make others wrong in order to get a stronger sense of who you are. Not only a person, but also a situation can be made wrong through complaining and reactivity, which always implies that this should not be happening. Being right places you in a position of imagined moral superiority in relation to the person or situation that is being judged and found wanting. It is that sense of superiority the ego craves and through which it enhances itself. So I'll stop there because I want to talk about that for a second. So I totally agree with what he's saying about that, but I also disagree with what he's saying about that. Because remember, and when I say we, I mean us, you and I, we've talked about this before, where the ego is not this evil thing that needs to be destroyed. The ego is a component, a mechanism that helps us to retain an identity and helps us to stay alive. The ego helps us to stay alive through instinct and reaction. And so the ego's job is to maintain the individual perspective of our persona, of our human perspective, and it also assists us in staying alive. And so if you are in this world and you're dealing with circumstances that are life-threatening or threaten your way of life, by default, you're going to have a reaction to that, right? And people can say, well, your ego is making you right and those who oppose you wrong. And so the ego is just using that to enhance itself or to give itself a bit of a boost because it craves that. Well, yeah, to some extent, but it's also going to help you stay alive in that situation if it is in fact a life-threatening situation or circumstance. So it's not just, oh, the ego's evil, it's wrong, it craves attention, we shouldn't do anything for the ego. But the ego is doing its job, it's doing what it was designed to do, which is to maintain an individual state of perspective, human perspective, and to keep us alive in this physical form. And it helps us to protect ourselves and to react in some way through our instincts. So it might, you might say it's like feeding itself or it's fueling itself to enhance itself or to grow itself as the ego, but that's its job. It's designed to do that. And in instances where it is a life-threatening situation, then it serves its purpose. You know, sometimes when spiritual teachers like Eckhart Tolle, whenever they're discussing and they're referencing these kinds of like interactions and these kinds of engagements with the ego, they are speaking on it from this point of view where there are no life-threatening situations in that moment. That is not the world we live in today. That is not the reality of this human existence. We definitely have to face and deal with circumstances that are life-threatening. And so perhaps when he was going through years of having these experiences and writing this material down, he was coming from the perspective of there aren't any situations that are life-threatening or that can be a threat to you. In his mind, you know, things are stable and things are consistent, things are the same across the board. It's us that we react to stuff that is just going to cause us more stress, more anxiety, more suffering. Well, yeah, but if you're in a life-threatening situation or you're dealing with circumstances that could definitely threaten your way of life and your existence, then yeah, you're going to definitely have a response, and it's going to come from the ego, and it's going to help us stay alive. So to some extent, I agree with what he is saying, and in some instances, I don't agree with that because, again, they demonize the ego as if it's this evil thing, and it's not. It's a tool that is doing exactly what it's designed to do. In defense of an illusion, facts undoubtedly exist. If you say light travels faster than sound and someone else says the opposite is the case, you are obviously right and he is obviously wrong. The simple observation that lightning precedes thunder could confirm this. So not only are you right, but you know you are right. Is there an ego involved in this? Possibly, but not necessarily. If you are simply stating what you know to be true, let's turn the page so I can get to the next part of that. If you are simply stating what you know to be true, the ego is not involved at all because there is no identification. Identification with what? With mind and a mental position. Such identification, however, can easily creep in. If you find yourself saying, "Believe me, I know," or "Why do you never believe me?" then the ego has already crept in. It is hiding in the little word me. A simple statement, light is faster than sound, although true, is now in the service of illusion of ego. It has become contaminated with a false sense of I. It has become personalized, turned into a mental position. The I feels diminished or offended because somebody doesn't believe what I said. Ego takes everything personally. Emotion arises, defensiveness, perhaps even aggression. Are you defending the truth? No, the truth in any case needs no defense. The light, and so let's disagree with him there as well, because he didn't live in a reality or in a world where thousands or millions of people, hundreds of thousands or millions of people cannot agree on facts. And so again, the reality that he is coming from is not the reality that we exist in today, where we exist in a world where people cannot come to consensus on what is a fact, what is established as truth, and what is an opinion. And so people in this day and age, operate from the perspective of opinion as if it is the absolute truth and there's no defense against it. And they call that a fact. Unfortunately, that's not the case. A fact is a fact. It's an indisputable truth. And if you have people who are disputing what is truth, what is a quote unquote fact, then it's not you defending yourself. You're not defending your I. You're just trying to defend a reality that we can all start to operate from as a premise. I can't work with someone if they don't believe that boats can't sink. If people believe that boats can't sink and that they're indestructible, then those people are going to take risks and put themselves in situations where a boat will sink. And when it sinks, it's going to be a threat to a person's life or to the situation altogether. Think of the Titanic as an example. It's unsinkable, but it is a boat and it operates by the laws of physics, so it's going to sink, and it sank. But you had a bunch of people who did not believe or consider the potential fact that a boat, a ship, can sink. And so they made a decision to only put so many lifeboats on there because of this new fact that they accepted as truth. And half the people on that ship went down with the ship because those facts they became disputed. And so when he's talking about, the I is offended, or the I is like, it's not about I, it's about what is reality versus what is a opinionated reality, which is a reality based in opinion. And how can you how can you work together? How can you work together to achieve something together? How can you work together to just, survive? And so when you have a bunch of individuals who don't operate from a place of fact and only operate from a place of opinion, then it's not you that is being offended. It is a threat to the reality, to the factual situation. It's a threat to the ship and half the people on it. And so it's not just an I that is offended. And so that's why when he's talking about this, he is coming from a place. Remember, he wrote this book when we had some of the most stable periods in our world. I mean, he wrote this material, I think, in like the 90s or early 2000s. And even though we had some stuff going on in the world that was not peaceful at all. I mean, that's when the war in Afghanistan started. But he personally wasn't affected. He wasn't involved in any of that, and he was living in a very comfortable place. I mean, I remember when he talked about writing this book, he said he would get up every day and this is Eckhart Tolle. I'm talking about Eckhart Tolle. He would get up every day and he said he would go and sit outside at Starbucks and he would have a cup of coffee, and he spent, months writing this book. And he would just sit there and observe people, and he said he would practice just being an observer, not being engaged or involved. But the problem is, in our world today, you don't have the luxury of always just being able to mind your own business or be in a place that's public where there's no conflict or there's no challenges going on there. There are going to be challenges, there are going to be conflicts. I worked at a Starbucks for years. I know what you run into when you're at a Starbucks. But he lived in a reality at that time, in his reality, in his world, where there was not the level of irregular conflict and challenges that we are experiencing today in one way or another. He wasn't writing this during the middle of a pandemic. He wasn't writing this during the middle of a global upheaval because of climate change. He wasn't writing this book through those things. And so he wasn't writing this when we've gone through a period where facts are no longer considered facts, they're just considered opinions, when they're not, when there's scientific truths, and then there's opinionated truths that people just base their reality on. So when he's talking about this, I already know the perspective he was coming from when he wrote this, but it's not all applicable to today, because today we are presented with a new set of challenges, a new set of experiences, and some of this advice and some of this perspective doesn't 100% line up with that. When Christianity was originally formed, 2,000 years ago or 1,000 plus years ago, there was a different reality, there was a different set of circumstances, there was different priorities and focuses for people at that time in the world. And so when you try to take Christianity and how it was created and how it was produced into a religious faith back in like the first few centuries, and then you bring it to the present moment, it's out of touch. It's out of touch with what's reality today, because people's realities are very different. The world is different, norms are different. You can apply something back then where it was okay to have a Jewish male as a slave in your home. It was okay to have that, and you could operate as if, oh, it's fine, you treat your slaves well and you're a good person. Like, who the hell, that's not okay to have a slave. Like, it's not okay to do that. And so, no, that's a different reality. It's a different worldview. So of course, when people are writing about stuff back then, they're not going to be taking into account the future and how things would be down the road. So their guiding principles, their practices, their beliefs are based in old world mentalities, mindsets, models that do not really translate as well to the current times. So you really have to take things into perspective and understand that. So back to this. So the I feels diminished or offended because somebody doesn't believe what I said. Ego takes everything personally. Emotion arises, defensiveness, perhaps even aggression. Are you defending the truth? No, the truth in any case needs no defense, unless you live in a world where people are disputing the truth and what truth is, even if it's blatantly and honestly in front of you, and it's easy to observe, but yet people don't agree with that, right? The light or sound does not care about what you or anybody else thinks. You are defending yourself, or rather the illusion of yourself, the mind-made substance. It would be even more accurate to say that the illusion is defending itself. Even if even the simple and straightforward realm of facts can lend itself to egoic distortion and illusion, how many more so the less tangible realm of opinions, viewpoints, and judgments, all of them thought forms that can easily become infused with a sense of I. Every ego confuses opinions and viewpoints with facts. Furthermore, it cannot tell the difference between an event and its reaction to that event. Every ego is a master of selective perception and distorted interpretation. Only through awareness, not through thinking, can you differentiate between fact and opinion. Only through awareness are you able to see. There is the situation, and here is the anger I feel about it, and then realize there are other ways of approaching the situation, other ways of seeing it and dealing with it. Only through awareness can you see the totality of the situation or person instead of adopting one limited perspective. Okay, now here's a good example, and I agree with him in this part of it, because what he is also saying is that when the ego has too much authority, or the ego has basically been left untamed or I won't say controlled, but it's basically been left to do what it wants to do naturally, then the ego does grow and it becomes more focused on a sense of I, but it focuses on basing its sense of self on specific things or specific movements or specific ideologies. This is where you get into trouble, because the ego is what is responsible, because the ego, again, is a tool, right? You can use a tool to build a house like a hammer, or you can use it to bash someone's skull in like a hammer in a murder scene. You can use a tool for both things. The ego to understand a perspective of perspective based in a series of points of view. What's going on here? So the ego. Sorry guys, I had to undo it and then redo it again. So the ego essentially has been left running. It's running amok, and it's kind of doing whatever it's going to do. That's where you get into problems, because that is the beginning of the Roman Catholic Church, where you had a bunch of power-hungry people who were left to run amok and wanted power and control and authority, and they used the faith and the belief system to empower themselves. This is why you have the Vatican. This is why you have the Pope. This is why you have all of the archbishops, all of the people who run the church. So this is why you have that. This is why you have people who are, ministers in various religious beliefs or Christian beliefs, and they use that to empower themselves. Think of Jim Baker and Tammy Faye. So think of those people, Tammy Baker. So think of those types of people where they use it and abuse it, and that's where you get into trouble. When the ego is allowed to be left to run amok, you get people who find themselves in positions of power, or Donald Trump, another example of that. People who use that and wield that power, and then it becomes an identity. And then the people who are followers, that becomes their identity, and that's all they base their identity around. You know, it's one thing to have an opinion, it's one thing to have a perspective, it's one thing to unite with people who believe the same thing and then want to create change and cause in this world for the betterment of all humans. It's another thing when only your opinion, only what you believe, only what you choose is only what is allowed, and you turn that belief, those opinions, those identities into your identity, and then that's all you are. And so that's all you do. It's a glorified belief system, and that's where the ego gets out of control, and then it can produce something. Same thing in the spiritual community. You have people in the spiritual community who turn the idea that they are in contact with God, or they have communication with the angels, or they can see the future and get one prediction right. You have people in the spiritual community who will have one experience or may come from a specific place, and they immediately build an entire character and an entire belief system behind them, and then that becomes dangerous because they use that as a way to manipulate and control other people. And then you find people getting into problems at that point, because those individuals who base their entire reality around their belief, when that reality cracks or they get a whiff of the real reality, or the core reality that we all share, once they get a whiff of that, then they break as people and they can't really function very well. And they start to kind of retreat or go back because they don't know how to process. Here's an example of this. I used to have a friend who, she had a vision of her own future, and she interpreted this future in a very specific way. And so she only accepted those symbolic references from her vision in a specific way. And whenever I would present her with an alternative, like, well, are you sure that symbol means, that? Or do you think it could potentially mean this? And I would present alternatives, because for me, those symbols represented something very different. But because she was wanting to see a specific future happen, she preferred for certain things to happen. Basically, what happened was she had a vision of seeing this special chair with this animal on the back of the chair, and she assumed it meant that this person she was in love with, that she couldn't get over, that it meant that she was going to be with this person, just because she saw that vision of that chair with this stain in the back. So that's the only interpretation of that she would accept. And so whenever I saw that, I thought, it felt like she was making a jump where she was grasping for meaning when the basic elements of that vision are very different. And so, in other words, I saw it as like, well, you're seeing this chair, there's a fish on the chair, this person liked to fish, or this person liked, to do sports and outdoor stuff. You're interpreting it as this person's going to come back into your life. What I interpret it as is a chair, which represents a place where you reside, or you sit and you wait, and then the fish represents, catching fish or trying to catch something or fishing for, and which is what she was trying to do. She was trying to catch this person. She was trying to get them to commit to her, but that wasn't happening. And this person had already moved on, and actually I think I'd gotten married. And so she was like stuck with that, and she refused to accept that it meant anything else. And so for her, she refused that was gonna be anything other than how she interpreted it. And so when this person went on and got married or got into a new relationship, it just broke her mind, because she couldn't believe that her visions were wrong. How can my visions be wrong? I always receive visions from God, and I'm always right. Well, she wasn't always right, but I'm always right. And everything I'm always given from God, I have to trust it. And if I can't trust my visions, then what am I supposed to trust? And I'm like, girl, it is not that serious. Like, you literally received a symbolic reference from your guides or from your higher self, and they're telling you that you are stuck in a place where you're fishing for someone, but they are not real, because in the thing, it was a wooden fish. It wasn't a real fish. I was like, it's not a real thing. It's something that you're trying to carve, trying to create, trying to have be a certain way, and that's not what it is. So you need to just drop it and move on, because you're stuck here and you're not moving forward, and you're going to continue to put yourself through suffering. So she interpreted that in a very different way, and for her it was a very different truth, but she wouldn't allow herself to interpret it any differently, and because of that, it broke her faith in God. And it really wasn't a true faith in God, because her faith in God was based on her being this like superior spiritual person in the world, and so she kept basing everything around that. And so when that crashed and burned, she was left in like this weird mental place, and she just didn't know who she was anymore, which is what I was just telling you. It's like some people, when their reality comes crashing down, or when their reality bubble changes, they don't know how to operate. They don't know how to be in this world, which is what I've mentioned before. Remember what I said last year, that we have in this world, there's a core reality, a reality that we all on a soul level agree to. So when we were born into this core reality, and that core reality will be maintained and sustained in the way it's meant to. And then we have these sub-realities where we have individuals who create their own reality and exist in their own reality bubble. And that reality can be a spiritual reality, it can be a religious reality, it can be a health-based reality, it can be a reality based in a political party. And so whenever people form these sub-realities where they believe that is real and the actual core reality isn't real, at that point you have two conflictive realities. You have the core reality, and then you have the bubble reality, that self-created artificial bubble reality based in beliefs and ideas. And so those two realities will exist once the artificial self-made bubble reality starts to no longer align with the core reality. At that point, then there's conflictive energy, and the core reality, which is everyone's reality, is going to win out every single time, because that represents creation, source, God, all things being what they are. Facts, you can call it facts. But when the core reality is getting slammed against the artificial reality, one person's individual bubble reality cannot compete against a core reality supported by millions and billions of minds and souls. It can't compete. One person against all of these realities that have been agreed to, so it's not gonna work. And so at some point, the artificial reality, that self-induced reality, the reality bubble for that person, is going to slam into the core reality, and the core reality will run out, which is what we are seeing in many cases where people bought into beliefs, and they only accepted that was, and I'll use myself as an example, because I just don't want to use like one side or one party or one group of people. But let's use people, for example, who got the vaccine. Some people bought into this reality that vaccines are 100% fail-proof, and that they are going to keep you from ever getting anything. And that was never reality. That was never a core reality. That was never the core reality. That was never a fact. The vaccine is only able to protect you by a percentage, and every person is different. So it's not a fail-proof safe. It's just like condoms. Condoms are not fail-proof. They're not 100%. But you have people who, as soon as they got the jab, they went out and started partying, and they're acting as if they're invincible, and nothing can stop them or affect them. And I'm like, okay, that's not really what we've been told, and that's not what the jab was for, and you still need a mask, you still need to socially distance, and now that we've got this other variant, you probably need to do more to protect yourself. So you need to get with reality and drop that bubble reality. Same thing, you have a bunch of people who bought into the reality that there was no COVID, that there was no virus, or that the vaccines don't actually work and they're just chips by the government. And then you got a bunch of those people also running into the same issue, where their bubble reality is running into the core reality, and their reality bubble is popping, and it is popping in an incredible rate, and it's happening again across the board with people in all spectrums of life. So when a person is trying to maintain a sense of a reality that they 100% buy into, even though it's not based or rooted in a core reality or in the facts of the core reality, Reality will win out every single time. This is when I say you will be humbled by God. This is why I tell people, be careful, because God is a humbling bitch. And so the core reality is a humbling bitch, and you will be corrected in what you believe as far as what is actually true and what isn't. And if you continue to persist in the false reality, you're going to continue to run into more suffering, and you're going to continue to run into brick walls. That's just the thing of it. So, truth, relative or absolute. Beyond the realm of simple and verifiable facts, the certainty that I am right and you are wrong is a dangerous thing in personal relationships, as well as in interactions between nations, tribes, religions, and so on. But if the belief I am right and you are wrong is one of the ways in which the ego strengthens itself, if making yourself right and others wrong is a mental dysfunction that perpetuates separation and conflict between human beings, does that mean there is no such thing as right or wrong behavior, action, or belief? And wouldn't that be the moral relativism that some contemporary Christian teachings see as the great evil of our times? The history of Christianity is, of course, a prime example of how the belief that you are in sole possession of the truth, that is to say, right, can corrupt your actions and behavior to the point of insanity. For centuries, torturing and burning people alive if their opinion diverged even in the slightest from church doctrine or narrow interpretations of scripture, the truth was considered right because the victims were wrong. They were so wrong that they needed to be killed. The truth was considered more important than human life. And what was the truth? A story you had to believe in, which means a bundle of thoughts. The 1 million people that mad dictator Pol Pot of Cambodia ordered killed included everybody who wore glasses. Why? To him, the Marxist interpretation of history was the absolute truth, and according to his version of it, those who wore glasses belonged to the educated class, the bourgeois, the exploiters of the peasants. They needed to be eliminated to make room for a new social order. His truth also was a bundle of thoughts. The Catholic and other churches are actually correct when they identify relativism, the belief that there is no absolute truth to guide human behavior, as one of the evils of our times. But you won't find absolute truth if you look for it where it cannot be found, in doctrines, ideologies, sets of rules, or stories. What do all of these have in common? They are made up of thought. Thought can be at best point to the truth, but it never is the truth. That's why Buddhists say the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. All religions are equally false and equally true, depending on how you use them. You can use them in the service of the ego, or you can use them in the service of the truth. If you believe only your religion is the truth, you are using it in the service of the ego. Used in such a way, religion becomes ideology and creates an illusory sense of superiority, as well as division and conflict between people. In the service of the truth, religious teachings represent signposts or maps left behind by awakened humans to assist you in spiritual awakening. That is to say, in becoming free of identification with form. There is only one absolute truth, and all other truths emanate from it. When you find that truth, your actions will be alignment with it. Human action can reflect the truth, or it can reflect illusion. Can the truth be put into words? Yes, but the words are, of course, not it. They only point to it. The truth is inseparable from who you are. Yes, you are the truth. If you look for it elsewhere, you will be deceived every time. The very being that you are is truth. Jesus tried to convey that when he said, I am the way and the truth and the life. These are words uttered by Jesus are one of the most powerful and direct pointers to the truth. If understood correctly, if misinterpreted, however, they become a great obstacle. Jesus speaks of the innermost I am, the essence, identity of every man and woman, every life form, in fact. He speaks of the life that you are. Some Christian mystics have called it the Christ within. Buddhists call it the Buddha nature. For Hindus, it is Atman, the indwelling God. When you are in touch with that dimension within yourself, and being in touch with it is your natural state, not some miraculous achievement. All your actions and relationships will reflect the oneness with all life that you sense deep within. This is love. Laws, commandments, rules, and regulations are necessary for those who are cut off from who they are, the truth within. They prevent the worst excess of the ego, and often they don't even do that. Love and do what you will, said St. Augustine. Words cannot get much closer to the truth than that. So I think I'll stop there. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there. So I'll stop there because that's quite some interesting things I want to discuss there. So it's in that when the ego is left unfettered, it just runs amok, and then it starts to create an entire world reality around itself, and that's when you get in trouble, because at that point it's no different than what was going on with the Roman Catholic Church, with the Catholic Church, when during the Inquisition, if you held a different opinion, then you were killed or tortured. Even people who were free thinkers, or people who were part of the Catholic faith, who were monks and individuals who studied, if they had different opinions or they diverged from the status quo or what was accepted doctrine, they would be killed or persecuted. There's a lot of old documents and old texts that have been passed around and that were produced by individuals during the second century, the first century, the second century, where they had different opinions about Jesus and about his movement and what was going on within that movement versus the people who were in power and in control and starting to direct the faith and the belief system. And they codified everything that they wrote. In other words, whatever they would write and pass amongst each other, in order to avoid being persecuted, they would essentially speak in code and reference certain symbology, certain ideas that were represented by symbols and certain beliefs. They would codify it, and they would include it in random writings and in random stories to try to communicate amongst themselves, because there was definitely a community of free thinkers who were still trying to maintain that ability, but not do it in a way that was going to cause them to be killed. So that was a very common that was a very common form of communication amongst free thinkers back in the day. Let's see, go through here because I want to see what you guys are asking about. So I'll stop there so we can get back to yeah, science is fact. I mean, it's and science is still science is still new, but it's also ancient, because there's a lot of things based in scientific evidence to support it as fact. And so the problem is that science is a tool. Science is a tool. Some people might say that to them science is a religion, but science is a tool. You can use science as a way to discern and understand the world we live in. But there are some organizations that have in the past used science as no differently than the church, where they use it to hold back humanity or to withhold, new knowledge and information because it doesn't align with the status quo. So science has the same, problems in historical people who were controlling the science or controlling the trends or controlling the movement also would not allow certain things to be sustained or supported, or they didn't agree with it, even if it was true too. So in some instances, science has also been an issue. But yeah, I trust science more than I trust a religious belief system, just because I know from reading as much as I've read and looking into some of these old stories that a lot of these ancient stories and tales and Gospels were not designed or written for the layperson. They were designed for people who actually spent time studying with priests and with the priestly caste back in the day. And so some of this information was supposed to be a symbolic representation set in the time frame using specific characters to get a piece of information or a knowledge or a teaching across. And then you put that information and those stories into the hands of those who didn't fully spend time studying or understanding the symbology. They take it as like word of mouth truth, and then they operate as if it's exactly what happened, when it may not have been exactly what happened, and it was something that was expressed in a certain way to reveal information and to give those who did study, who did spend time in the priestly caste, it gave them a chance to understand it more deeply than the layperson. Because you have to remember also that most of the people during those periods were illiterate. They did. Yeah, we are one. We are all one, but we forget that. And I think it's easy to forget that we're all human beings and we're all connected to each other. Even if people don't believe in God or believe in the universe as like an entity, or believe in like this consciousness connection between all of us, we're still all one. We're still all human, and everybody can agree that we're all human beings. And the problem is that for some people, and a large amount of people, lives are expendable. Lives don't mean as much. Lives are not as valuable. And so as long as they have an opinion or they believe something and someone is in opposition of it, the opposition should be squashed, should be destroyed, terminated. And that's a really complicated situation to be in, because if you are coming from a place of, let's say, fact or science or experience, wisdom, if you're coming from a place and a mindset that is supported in that, and you are focused on saving lives and helping as many people as you can, but a percentage of the people you're trying to help don't agree with that and would prefer that you die or that you just disappear, at that point you get into a little bit of a conundrum, because you can try to help these individuals and these people, but they don't want you to exist. You shouldn't exist. And so they want to just squash you and destroy you. And that's immediate by default, that's ego. That's the ego, and like a complete loss of control of the ego, and that sense of I. And that's why we're in the situation that we're in today, because everybody's focused, a lot of people are focused on I, and they're operating from a place of I, even though when you're going through a catastrophic event, you can focus on I if you're the only I you have to be concerned with. But if your survival depends on everyone's survival, or as many surviving as can survive and make it through, at that point it changes the priorities. You can try to, again, as an individual, survive and just only focus on yourself. But until enough people come together to work on something unitedly, it's just going to continue to be this like back and forth. And the people who want you to disappear are going to continue to just feel as if they're right, and they have a right to feel that way, and that feeling that way is acceptable behavior. Having the thought that someone should be destroyed so that your belief and idea could be correct is, at that point, you're basically in bed with the devil, the darker side of yourself, the shadow side of yourself, the ego self, in complete lack of control. So you have to remember who you are. If we're all aspects of the divine, if we're all interconnected, if we are all one, if we are God, then if you wish death upon someone who opposes you, or if you wish their destruction or their suffering, at that point you're wishing it upon yourself, and that energy will come back. And that's something that I've had to really work on, because it's so easy, right? It's so easy for us to be so pissed off and so angry that we want to hurt the people who are hurting us, or we want the person who is causing pain and suffering for others to be destroyed, or to be, cease. And even in us, who are not intending to take that person's life, we're trying to cause that to happen, and we're just observing it. It's still hard, because it's easy to fall into that mindset, but it's still wishing it upon ourselves. And so if we don't pull ourselves back, we become exactly that thing as well, and we're no different. So we have to remember that if we want to operate from a place of a loving God, then we have to express caring, compassion, consideration, nurturing in the way that a loving God would. A loving God wouldn't just you disagree with me, bye, and then that's it. No, a loving God wouldn't operate that way. A loving God would understand that that child is not in a place of proper thinking or understanding about things, and that there's lessons and experiences that they need in order to understand, but they don't have those experiences. They lack that knowledge, that wisdom, that understanding. And so that is the reason why. So loving God doesn't blame or hate or become angry with the individual. Loving God understands that its child needs more experiences. Oh, well, you're lacking that knowledge. You're lacking that information. So let me allow you to receive more so that you can possibly have that chance to understand more. And if you choose not to, then that is your choice, and I respect your choice, and I'll honor that choice that you make for yourself in this, but I still offer you an opportunity. And in my mind, if you're in a world where you believe something and you start to experience a reality in this world that is exactly though everything externally is supporting the opposite, and you're only feeding yourself information that supports your belief, which is what that person that I used to have as a friend was doing, at that point, that is you basically dishonoring yourself, and you're slapping God literally in the face, because you're saying, no, your reality, what you're trying to offer, what you're trying to teach me is not, I don't accept that. And so you're turning yourself against yourself in that moment. And at that point, you start to run into challenges and issues, and you start to stumble, and you start to fall. And if you don't catch yourself, if you don't recognize that others who are in the same camp as you are having the same experiences, and you're starting to see more and more of that, at that point, all of it is self-induced, and you're only going to receive support and the support and honoring of that from the universe, from God. And then it's like not a surprise as to what happens at that point. The chosen one. Cassie's like, the chosen one mentality. I see that all the time in the spiritual community. You know, Cassie, it's something to work through, because every single person, I have seen this happen with every single person who goes through a spiritual awakening or goes through enough of a spiritual experience that it can twist you up inside. An example of, and I use myself as an example because I always use myself as an example, because I can't speak about somebody else if I don't know what that is, right? So for myself, when I first started to develop to see how accurate and how precise some of what I was sensing and some of what I was getting was, immediately that goes to your head, right? Especially a child like myself, being a child who was abused, who was mistreated, who was just, tossed to the side. I wasn't acknowledged as someone deserving of love or of being treated well. And so I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was starving for attention, for love. And as I started to develop myself and develop my business, by default, because of the conditioning I endured from the experiences, by default, all of that immediately started to fuel my ego, feed my mind, feed my sense of self, and the evil, angry, Ferny I, right? And I had to catch myself, and I had to do that over and over and over again, because when you are at the top of your game, when you are doing exceptionally well, or when you are just doing a great job, and not a lot of people around you are able to achieve that same thing as quickly, or you're not seeing it with the people around you, at that point you feel special, you feel unique, you feel like you stand out, something is different from you than everybody else. And that just happens naturally with anyone who is evolving and growing and encountering a part of themselves that they even personally didn't realize that they could express. And so when I began to evolve myself, all of that was going to my head, and I definitely saw my ego get bloated. And this is not the first time that happened, because I remember this happening once before in my life when I was when the first time I lost a lot of weight, which the first time when I was 60 pounds, when I came back to school, this was in high school, I felt like the shit. I was like, oh yeah, I'm like everything, and I'm so hot, and I'm so, because you feel that way when you lose that much weight so fast, and it's a huge like surge to your ego. And so I became kind of cocky and arrogant and sarcastic, which nothing has changed apparently. So apparently I feel like I'm the same way to some extent, but I was an asshole. And I didn't recognize that, and I didn't see that in myself. But the people closest to me saw that change, and they saw how much I was letting it go to my head. And I remember my cousin Jennifer once saying to me, I don't think you realize that some of us who love you, we don't want to be around you, or we don't want to hang around you because of the way you are. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah. She's like, ever since you lost weight, you just let this go to your head, and you just think you're this incredible thing, and you're just an asshole, and nobody wants to be around you. And I was just like, whew, immediately a blow to my heart and a crushing effect in my heart. And after, I remember, after she said that to me, I went home, I cried my eyes out, because the last thing I would want is for people who I love to feel uncomfortable around me, or to not want to be around me. So I was hurt. I was heartbroken by that. But I picked myself back up, and I assessed myself, and I started to examine myself. And I was like, maybe they're right. Maybe there is something to that. Maybe they have a point. So I took that and I worked on it, right? I worked on it. And I after that, I was able to come out of that period in my life, and, my sister, my cousin and I, we got close again and everything. But it helped me to understand what others were experiencing. Because sometimes what we think about ourselves isn't always what others are experiencing, or what others are feeling or getting from us. And so when I was starting to, and so again, next time that I went through this in my life is when I started to develop my business, and I started to build a name for myself and a brand for myself, and I was getting attention, and I was having people praise me all the time, and all of that other stuff, and it was going to my head again. And I had to catch myself this time, because I didn't want to make the same mistake. There have been times where I've noticed that I definitely allowed my ego that day to run amok, but I have to catch myself and pull myself back. It doesn't matter, and I have to, essentially I have to talk myself out of feeling special. Because again, feeling special, you automatically want to categorize yourself and separate yourself from everybody else. But we're all the same. We're all part of the same God. We're all part of the same being in one, separated into different perspectives. So I have to remind myself that I'm still God. I'm still part of God. I'm with all of you. I'm the same. But I may be slightly different. There may be differences to me in ability and capability, whatever, but we're all the same nonetheless. So I have to bring myself back to that core reality, that spiritual reality, and not want to throw myself into the I'm special, I'm unique, everyone is going to glorify me. You have to watch it, because if you're not, it will run amok, and then you'll lose yourself in that. And that's what ends up causing people to lose their sense of reality, and then they start to create a bubble reality based around that, and that can get dangerous as well. So it tends to happen a lot with people who are movie stars, or people who are professional singers who get record deals or start to do a lot more showbizy type stuff. They get more of that attention and praise, and it goes to their head, and they can change because of it. And then that change will start to completely shift the trajectory and their experiences in their lives, and they lose touch with reality. Yeah. Thank you, Cassidy. She's like, I'm planning to listen to the podcast tonight, Jesus tonight. Anyone who hasn't listened to his podcast needs to. I just made one this morning. So I just made another podcast episode this morning before I started working. So I recorded it. So that should be out. And that episode is about how sometimes when we're going through a lot in our lives, and life is not easy, it's challenging, which, life is challenging, is reality, right? Sometimes when we are trying to maintain or work towards a goal or a desire, sometimes you have to pull your energy back from things that you may not want to, or you may not realize are sucking you dry. And so I talk about that in my experience and what I've just gone through this last year, because my energy was starting to get scattered, because I was starting to focus on too many things all at once. And whenever you start to focus on too many things all at once, you start to lose the intensity of energy for every single thing you do. And so you start to become less effective. You start to lose that drive, that ambition. You start to feel less effective. And so I've had to do that in this last, I want to say in the last 3 or 4 months. I've pulled my energy back and pulled it away from things that have just been pulling energy from me or taking energy from me. And it's in some instances people, in some instances it's activities. In some instances, it's other responsibilities that we just don't need to be responsible for. You got to pull your energy back, because once you pull your energy back, you start to feel a buildup of energy again. It's almost like a battery. Once you stop trying, it's almost like when you're playing on your phone and you know that you're running out of battery and your battery's running low, but you still have all these things going on your phone. You're still draining the battery, just you're draining it out quickly, but you're trying to maintain all these different apps and things. You have to just close all the apps and only focus on one at a time and reduce all the excess power drains, so that way you can get through that one activity and get it done. And sometimes that's what needs to happen whenever we're going through a period like now, where there's a lot of emotional turmoil happening in the world. People are feeling it like no other time before in like decades. And so at this point, there's like a mass trauma. There's a collective trauma that we're all going through in one way or another. And this is going to take a long time to kind of recoup from, all of us who are seeing everything play out the way it is, having personal experiences, etc. So yeah, humbleness is the way to go. What I've found that helps me to stay humble is just to give to people, like just to give or to offer something for free, just to help people without feeling like you need something in return, because that helps you to connect with that inner sense of compassion and sense of loving source being. It allows you to connect with that part of yourself, and then you will start to connect with the humanity in the other person as well, even if it's with the person you're trying to help. That's it. All right, guys, we're out of questions, and that's it. So I got to get to getting. So I love you all. I will be back Friday. One thing that I want to mention, though, before I leave is I'm actually thinking about, I already have students, and I already do like one-on-one coaching and one-on-one training and coaching with people for their psychic abilities and their mediumship abilities. But I'm thinking of actually doing a group class on a monthly basis, where I would basically get together with like maybe 7 or 8 people in actually we'll try to do it on a weekly basis, once a week, like an hour or two a week, on a Saturday, having this course where people basically are in that group, and I'm working with people as a group, but then I'm also focusing on specific issues that may come up as people are working through the exercises. So I'm thinking of doing that. My teacher Pam has already been doing that forever. That's what she does more than individual coaching. I like individual coaching because everybody's different. Not everybody evolves the same way with their abilities, but I'm thinking of doing group ones as well. I'm also thinking of possibly getting into group mediumship sessions, where instead of people having to book a one-on-one appointment with me, because some people have to wait a while for that, doing it where it's a group of people in it, and so, but it's so I'm thinking about stuff like that. So tell me what you think about the group mediumship or psychic development, because I think that would be a thing that I think people would enjoy that. So all right, guys, I love you all. Please take care of yourselves, and I will be back